A security camera at Chicago's Union Station captured something impossible on the morning of March 14, 2019. A young girl stepped off the Amtrak arriving from Boston carrying a boarding pass printed 3 weeks before she was born. When investigators pulled up her records, they found her birth certificate dated April 2, 2019. The girl standing in front of them shouldn't exist yet. This is what really happened, and why the Department of Transportation sealed every document related to that morning. Sarah Chen was 13 years old according to the ID she carried, but something about her made veteran station manager Robert Hayes pause when she walked past his office that Thursday morning. Maybe it was the way she moved through the crowded terminal like she already knew where every person would be standing. Maybe it was her clothes, a jacket with a brand logo he didn't recognize despite working retail security for 20 years before joining Amtrak. Or maybe it was the look in her eyes, like someone watching a movie they'd already seen. Hayes called her over. Standard procedure for unaccompanied minors. That's when things got weird. Sarah handed him her boarding pass without hesitation, and the date stamped across the top made his coffee go cold in his hand. March 14, 2019. Today's date. Except the pass had been printed on February 21, 2019, and the barcode scan confirmed it had been issued from Boston's South Station at 6:47 a.m. on that same February morning. Hayes checked his computer 3 times. February 21 was 3 weeks ago. But here's the thing that made him call his supervisor, then his supervisor's supervisor, then eventually someone from Homeland Security. The paper itself was wrong. Hayes had processed thousands of tickets. He knew the weight, the texture, the way current Amtrak paper felt between your fingers. This ticket felt different. Newer somehow, like it had been printed on equipment that didn't quite match what they currently used. The ink had a slight sheen to it that reminded Hayes of the new biodegradable printing system Amtrak had been testing, the one they wouldn't roll out for another 6 months. Sarah sat in the security office and answered every question with unsettling calm. Yes, she had boarded in Boston this morning. No, she didn't understand why everyone seemed confused. She showed them her phone, a model that wouldn't hit the market until the iPhone 12 launched that fall. The apps on her screen included updated versions of Instagram and TikTok with interface designs that looked subtly wrong, like someone had redesigned them and then changed their mind. Detective Marcus Webb from the Chicago PD arrived within the hour. 15 years investigating everything from fraud to missing persons, and he'd never seen anything that made less sense. Sarah's story stayed consistent. She lived in Cambridge, Massachusetts. She'd taken the Lake Shore Limited train that morning, the 9:30 departure from South Station. She was traveling to visit her aunt in Oak Park. All perfectly normal except for one detail. The Lake Shore Limited didn't run on Thursdays in February. It was a seasonal schedule thing. Webb checked. The train Sarah claimed to have taken wouldn't operate again until March 14th. Today. They pulled the passenger manifest from February 21st anyway, the date on Sarah's ticket. No Sarah Chen. They checked every passenger who'd traveled the Boston to Chicago route that week. Nothing. But when they checked today's manifest, March 14th, her name was there. Seat 12B in coach car 4. The conductor who'd checked her ticket that morning, a woman named Patricia Delgado, confirmed she'd scanned Sarah's pass around 11 a.m., somewhere between Albany and Buffalo. The system had accepted it without any alerts. Dr. Elizabeth Winters, a neurologist from Northwestern Memorial Hospital, was brought in when Sarah started describing headaches. Not regular headaches. Temporal displacement episodes, she called them. Sarah would be sitting in the security office, answering questions, and suddenly she'd pause mid-sentence. Her eyes would lose focus for maybe 5 or 10 seconds. When she came back, she'd sometimes continue a conversation no one else remembered starting, or she'd reference events that hadn't happened yet. During one episode, Sarah mentioned a fire at the Willis Tower that wouldn't occur until 3 days later. She described the floor, the time, even the cause, electrical malfunction in the HVAC system on the 47th floor. Webb made note of it, not sure what else to do. When the fire actually happened exactly as Sarah described, he stopped sleeping well. Dr. Winters ran every test she could think of. CAT scans, MRIs, blood work. Everything came back normal except for one strange reading. Sarah's brainwaves showed irregular patterns during her episodes, like her neural activity was oscillating between different frequencies. Winters had seen something similar once before, in patients who'd experienced severe dissociative states after trauma. But Sarah showed no signs of psychological distress. If anything, she seemed more grounded than most 13-year-olds Winters had evaluated. The real breakthrough came from an unexpected source. James Kowalski, a physics professor at the University of Chicago, read about Sarah's case through a colleague who consulted with the police occasionally. Kowalski had spent a decade studying theoretical chronodynamics, the physics of time flow and temporal mechanics. His work was considered fringe by many colleagues, the kind of research that didn't get you tenure. But he developed a hypothesis about quantum temporal displacement that suddenly seemed less theoretical. Kowalski met Sarah on March 16th. He brought equipment, sensors that could detect minute fluctuations in electromagnetic fields and quantum probability states. What he found made him rewrite 3 chapters of his unpublished manuscript. Sarah's localized spacetime, the bubble of reality immediately surrounding her body, was oscillating. Not dramatically, but measurably. She existed fractionally out of phase with the present moment, like a radio slightly off station, picking up signals from 2 frequencies at once. More testing revealed something extraordinary. Sarah's memories were layered. She remembered her childhood in Cambridge, playing in the Common, her 10th birthday party at the Museum of Science. But she also remembered things that hadn't happened yet. She knew her aunt would pick her up from Union Station on March 14th driving a blue Honda Civic. She knew they'd stop for deep dish pizza at Lou Malnati's in Oak Park. She knew her aunt's dog, Max, would bark twice when she walked through the door. All of this information existed in Sarah's mind as clear memories, even though from everyone else's perspective, these events were still hours away. Detective Webb accompanied Sarah and her aunt to Oak Park that evening, just to see what would happen. Every detail matched. The blue Civic. The pizza stop. Max's 2 barks. Sarah moved through these moments with the comfortable familiarity of someone reliving a fond memory. Her aunt, Linda Morrison, noticed something everyone else had missed. Sarah kept saying things like, "Remember when we," about events that were happening for the first time. "Remember when we stopped at that light. Remember when you ordered the spinach pizza. Remember when Max knocked over your bag." By March 18th, Sarah had been examined by 17 different specialists. Neurologists, physicists, psychiatrists, and one very confused temporal anthropologist who'd been studying circadian rhythm disruptions in shift workers. The consensus was impossible to reach because the situation was impossible to explain. Sarah Chen appeared to be experiencing time non-linearly, living through moments she'd already lived, carrying memories of a future that was simultaneously her past. The government sealed the case on March 23rd. Official explanation: administrative error with boarding pass printing. Sarah returned to Boston with her mother, who'd flown in from a business trip in Seattle. But Kowalski kept studying the data, and what he found changed his entire understanding of how time might actually work. The train Sarah rode, that specific Lake Shore limited service on March 14th, had passed through a region of unusual geomagnetic activity. Solar flare effects combined with a rare alignment of the Earth's magnetic field had created what Kowalski called a temporal resonance zone. For approximately 40 minutes, between Syracuse and Buffalo, the train had traveled through a pocket of spacetime where the normal rules of causality became fluid. Most passengers felt nothing, maybe slight nausea or a sense of déjà vu. But Sarah, for reasons Kowalski couldn't fully explain, had synchronized with the temporal distortion. His theory suggested that Sarah had lived through March 14th once before, in a timeline that had somehow folded back on itself. The boarding pass from February 21st wasn't from the past. It was from a future February 21st that existed in a loop with the present March. Time, Kowalski proposed, might not be a line but a spiral, and Sarah had gotten caught where the spiral intersected itself. Other cases started surfacing once researchers knew what to look for. A businessman in Philadelphia who'd checked into a hotel with a confirmation email dated 2 weeks after his stay. A college student in Austin who'd posted Instagram photos from a concert before the band had announced the tour. Small temporal anomalies, most dismissed as technical glitches or pranks. But the pattern was there. The most disturbing discovery came from Amtrak's own archives. Similar incidents had been reported going back decades. A sailor in 1952 who'd boarded a train in San Diego with a ticket from 1953. A teenager in 1978 who'd arrived in Portland knowing details about Mount St. Helens eruption 2 years before it happened. The railroad companies had quietly documented these cases, filed them away, never made them public. Too strange. Too likely to cause panic or damage business. Dr. Winters kept in touch with Sarah over the following months. The temporal episodes gradually decreased in frequency and intensity. By summer, Sarah seemed to be fully synchronized with normal time flow. But she never forgot the experience of living outside time's usual boundaries. She told Winters she missed it sometimes, the feeling of knowing what came next, of holding tomorrow's memories in her mind alongside yesterday's. Sarah's case remained classified, but pieces of her story leaked through scientific circles and online forums dedicated to temporal anomalies. Some people believed it. Most didn't. But for those who'd witnessed it firsthand, who'd seen the boarding pass and the phone and the look in Sarah's eyes when she described events that hadn't happened yet, there was no doubt. Time wasn't what they'd thought it was. It could bend, fold, overlap in ways that let a girl ride a train that departed 3 weeks before she boarded it. The question that kept everyone awake at night wasn't how it happened. Kowalski's theories provided a framework, even if they couldn't be proven. The real question was simpler and more terrifying. If Sarah could slip between moments, if time could fold back on itself even once, what else was possible? How many other people had traveled through these temporal loops without anyone noticing? How many futures had already happened, recorded in the memories of people living through their own personal time spirals? Union Station in Chicago looks the same as it did on March 14, 2019. Trains arrive and depart on schedule. Passengers move through the Grand Hall under the vaulted ceilings, checking tickets and finding platforms. But security manager Robert Hayes still pauses sometimes when he sees a young traveler walking alone. He checks their boarding pass a little more carefully now. He looks at the date, the paper quality, the way the ink catches the light. Because he knows something most people don't. The line between yesterday and tomorrow isn't as solid as we pretend. Sometimes it ripples. And sometimes, if conditions are just right, a person can slip through the ripples and arrive before they've left, carrying tomorrow's memories in today's hands. Sarah Chen is 17 now, studying physics at MIT. She's working on her own theories about temporal mechanics, building on Kowalski's work. She says she still remembers that morning in Chicago, remembers it twice actually. Once as it happened and once as it will happen again, in a future that might also be the past. She's waiting to see if the spiral completes itself, if one day she'll find herself back on that train, holding a boarding pass dated 3 weeks before she was born, riding toward a moment she's already lived.